possible is a binary question. Is it yes or no?
Yes.
Where the achievable, practicable is going to be a continuum, and to what extent.
Right.
So just,
As is practicable.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I just view it that way, that it's really about, scale.
Peter,
No,
sorry, we went to
stretching.
Stacy and then Oliver.
I think I was just responding to what John was saying earlier about not feeling comfortable with using the barometer of if districts are already moving towards conversation. I think just pulling back, I think what I was hearing Oliver say was it might be helpful for us to even have a list of these are the qualifiers that meet the term of not practicable. These are some qualifiers that don't meet not practicable. And I think we're kind of making metrics about metrics here, but I was under the impression that because it's nuanced, we're going to have 3 or 4 things kind of on each side of this. It's not going to be oh, well, you hit one of these, therefore it's not practicable. I'm not sure, but that's what I was starting to hear was kind of if this, then that.
No, I agree, because the practicable is not going to be a yes or no. And every case is going to be a little nuanced, but what's on the list of what is practical?
I was going to just say that I think that, the point also is to come back to the goals of the law, that we're not trying to, I think, just merge for the sake of merging. Merging is not the end. Merging is a means to an end, and particularly when you're considering the alternative governance structures, that, the criteria before the board is whether that structure can meet the goals of the law better than the preferred structure. So it's really not about whether practicably people can merge, it's whether that merger can practicably achieve the goals of the law.
So just on the debt issue, the other point I really want to make is because many of the proposals that mention disparity in debt, they cite gross numbers. So they'll say our debt is $10,000 and debt of somebody else is $1 million. And on the face, they sound like big numbers, but in our analysis, we have to apportion those on a per student basis to truly understand what the impact is. Yeah. And I don't think any of the proposals out there actually do that. So we need to make sure that we're doing that. And again, to keep it simple, and I think this gets to the broader issue of some of the fiscal capacity questions, as we're looking at defining what's practicable, I think one of the gates is just pick a number. I'm just saying 20% plus or minus the mean of the proposed districts. If they're within that band, we should consider them practicable and not delve any deeper into the question of indebtedness, because they're within the range. And if they're outside of the range, then we go and we probe a little bit further.
So, and just in terms of process, do we want to put that down on our list, and we're going to be getting back to this list?
Well,
And is there things that people, so if we wanted to add, and Oliver, do you want to just articulate your idea? Once, I'm just making sure Stacy has a chance.
Please read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to put it on our list.
And we're putting it on, sorry. You're stating, Oliver, something that would not meet the not practicable threshold. Correct?
We gotta
It's
double
not
negative.
practical to,
What we're saying is, for
Yeah.
purposes of greatly varying levels of indebtedness, if the equalized per pupil spending of the districts in a proposed merger under the Secretary's plan is within plus or minus 20% of the mean equalized per pupil spending, it would be considered practicable.
maybe we could just say within X% at the moment.
Yeah.
Let's see how the numbers spread.
What if we compared the debt of each district to the state average?
I don't think so.
yeah.
Why?
No,
I mean,
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
We're comparing two small.
Yeah, we were
I know,
talking
I know.
earlier, and it was said we should stay within our purview. Everything we're talking about is changing the law. I'm for that, but just wanted to point it out.
Well, this is part of 49 is saying we have to consider indebtedness, but they didn't say what indebtedness meant. So that's where it is in our purview, because that's something, according to Act 49, that we have to consider. So if it's something that we have to, and again, as John said, consider, and in that definition of what is practicable, indebtedness has to be there. So we should have some sort of criteria about indebtedness within that definition, and trying to solve that problem. That's not, I mean, that's just, we have to determine if it's practicable to merge two districts if their indebtedness is not compatible. And so that's where I think some of the examples have come in, that we have, you know, $2 or $1.20 and equals $1.50, and is that practicable? And that's for the board to decide. This is, again, I'm hoping that we have, you know, an hour plus before we have another break, that we can maybe have some sort of list that we then could maybe photocopy. So right now we're brainstorming, working together, and have something to really pick apart. So anything else right now, Stacy, could you just repeat back to us what's there? And if people feel really
Sure.
strongly, we're going to come back to this as a placeholder so we can have more conversations about other ideas of what's practicable.
Okay. So under the category of something that would meet this is not practicable, I have that a district would be moving towards efficient or in-scale governance models. That's one of the possible spokes or gates, I guess as Oliver said. Another thing that would meet that it's not practical is if the equalized per pupil spending for districts is greater than plus or minus X of the mean equalized per pupil spending, that it would be considered not practicable. The only thing I have so far that I think we've talked about that some folks were saying did not meet the not practicable threshold was whether or not we would consider no votes in towns. Was something I'd heard.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah.
No votes, as in the community
Oh,
voted no?
What I heard, I believe that I heard some folks say that that would not be one of the gates that would deem something not practicable.
Yeah, and with the first point, the working towards an agreement, to get to the secretary's point, I would agree to that if there was some sort of agreement between the two communities, like you had cited.
The formal, yeah.
Yeah, a formal
agreement.
relationship, a formal agreement between the two, but just having them sit at the same table and kind of throwing ideas back and forth, I don't think I would agree with that point as far as putting them on the list.
Okay.
Well, and again, this is a list we're going to come back to and double
As
back,
possible.
but yeah, and just having that. Can we I feel like we're in 5 different locations right now, but John?
Just, it sounded also that Oliver was making a distinction between equalized spending per pupil and large differentials there, as opposed to, or in addition to, large differentials in indebtedness per something or other. Is that correct? Would either of those be what you would consider a possible obstacle?
It's a two-step gate. So the first is there a wide disparity in per pupil spending? If so, is that disparity caused by disparity of debt?
And if the answer is no,
If the answer is no, there's a presumption that it is
not an obstacle.
it is not an obstacle.
You
Exactly.
threw out 20%, right?
I just threw out 20% as a reasonable, that's a pretty common number.
Oh, okay, well, let me
Please
just
say
follow
that.
that up a little bit. Would you consider that a large differential in per pupil, equalized per pupil spending itself could represent an obstacle to convergence?
It could, and that's why
So I think they're separate.
you're absolutely right. So I think that first gate speaks to a broader sort of fiscal capacity issue. Indebtedness is specifically outlined as a criteria we need to be looking at under the law, so that's why I want to make sure we tie it back to that. But I do think that and Dan's example is a good one. You could actually have communities where neither one has debt, but have significant levels of spending. But this is where it gets a little bit nuanced, because if there is no debt and there's wide disparity in spending, that could be an indicator that there's inequity of programming as well, which one of the goals here is to try to actually equalize.
Or teacher compensation levels, or whatever. I just to get at the nomenclature a little bit, I feel like we're sort of describing hurdles, and we're going to attempt, because there are all kinds of hurdles, and we're attempting to examine some of them and say,